Thanos' snap was undeniably devastating. In one fell swoop, he managed to kill 50% of all life in the entire universe. If that doesn't give you a UAV, I don't know what will. But as it turns out, it's much more devastating than I initially anticipated. This video originally was supposed to be about how much dust Thanos' snap made. You know, he snaps his fingers, everyone turns to dust. The more I worked into it though, the more devastating it got. So this is why Thanos' snap is way more bleak than you thought. As I implied earlier, the key to how bad the snap is actually has to do with all the dust he made. Now, just to set the record straight, I'm only calculating the amount of dust based off life on Earth. Why? Well, I don't know how many living things exist in the Marvel Universe, and frankly, I don't want to know. And I can safely assume that Earth in the Marvel Universe has a similar amount of life to Earth in the real world. To start, I need to figure out how much mass all life on Earth has. Fortunately for me, people much smarter than me have already crunched those numbers. There's roughly 550 gigatons of carbon-based biomass on Earth. Since carbon makes up 50% of all biomass anyways, that means the total amount of biomass is around 1,100 gigaton. But since we're already going to remove 50% of all life from the equation, we only have to stick with 550. I'm going to assume a direct one-to-one conversion from living thing to dust, because that's what it looks like in the movie. When Spider-Man gets dusted, it looks like his entire body just kind of floofs away, so I'm going to go with that. Now, with all that mass getting turned one-to-one, that's already 550 gigatons of ash. Now that's a massive amount of dust. The second I came up with those numbers, alarm bells started ringing. Like I said before, that's a lot of dust. And you know what else spews a lot of dust into the air? Volcanoes and meteors. And those typically cause very bad times. In 1815, Mount Tambor in Indonesia erupted, in what is now considered to be the largest recorded volcanic eruption. It threw so much ash into the air that it blocked out the sun and cooled global temperatures by at least 1 degree Celsius. The aftermath was so severe that 1816 was called the year without a summer. The main culprit in this cooling? Sulfur. Mount Tambor spilled over 60 megatons of sulfur into the atmosphere. Sulfur, as it turns out, is the main culprit whenever you have one of these big global cooling catastrophes. Now, all the dust is bad, but sulfur's the thing that's going to stay in the air and cause issues. So I did some digging, and it turns out the human body is 0.2% sulfur. I couldn't really find numbers for other animals and life forms, so I'm just going to take the 0.2 and apply it to life across the board. With all that in mind, I just have to do some quick math. Turns out, out of 550 gigatons of ash, 1.1 gigatons of it is sulfur. Now, to those of you that don't understand the metric system, 1.1 gigatons might not sound like a lot, but gigatons are larger than megatons. And I mean significantly bigger. Our 1.1 gigatons of sulfur is 1,100 megatons. Not a lot, just 18 times more than Mount Tambor, the biggest volcano ever recorded. And to make sure I'd covered all my bases, I actually went ahead and I removed all oceanic and subterranean life from the count. That brings our total number down to 948 megatons, which is still 16 times more than the amount Mount Tambor erupted. If only 6% of this sulfur makes its way into the atmosphere, there will be global cooling on the level of the year without a summer. We are talking about a temperature decrease of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And that's just the lower estimate of the snap. If more than 6% makes it into the air, it gets much worse. So, what if more sulfur makes its way into the atmosphere? Well, the more it goes up, the further away we get from the worst volcano in history, and the closer we get to devastation on par to the meteorite that killed the dinosaurs. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs is estimated to have released about 30 to 500 gigatons of sulfur. That means just counting the sulfur, the high end is 1/30th of that asteroid. But if we count all the dust, we get way closer. Sulfur is the main contributor because it will stay in the air the longest, but any amount of ash in the atmosphere will help block out the sun. So, minimum amount of dust and sulfur, something closer to a big volcano. Maximum amount, something close to a massive meteorite. Our scale is literally mass famine and mass extinction. And we are somewhere in the middle. And this is only going to be exacerbated by the fact that 50% of all life is gone. So let's think of it from the human standpoint. We've lost 50% of all people, and also the sun has been partially blotted out. crops are failing. Normally, a famine can be worked around. The government can distribute aid, and, there can be a worldwide effort. What government is going to function where 50% of all people are gone? What organization will function after 50% of its members disappear? There will be worldwide chaos. There is a worldwide famine, and no single person or organization is capable of helping because they're in as much chaos as everyone else. And that's just the human side. I cannot think of a situation where a 50% decrease in all life will help when there's also a worldwide famine going on. The only life forms that will come out relatively unsaved are things that live subterraneanly and those that live in the ocean. And with all the life in the ocean might acidify from all the amount of dust that's suddenly thrown in there. So no, Thanos did not kill 50% of all life. My guess, based purely off of vibe, is probably closer to 60 or 70 at minimum. Like I said, the low end is mass famine, and the upper end of this is closer to a mass extinction. The immediate aftermath of the snap will be the worst, because all of the heavy ash will still be in the air. Eventually that will filter down, and only sulfur will be left. But the sulfur will still cause problems in the long run. And I know some people are going to bring up that not all ash from all bodies will end up in the air, because it will take some wind or something to transport it up from the ground to the sky. But like I said, if even around 6% of the ash ends up in the sky, we have a year without a summer. And that is on top of 50% of all life already being dusted. A realistic Avengers Endgame would show full societal collapse, because losing 50% of all people is already devastating, but then having a famine, no government or organization will be able to survive that unscathed. And let's be honest, if society collapses, you're going to want a fair and non-biased source for your news. How else are you going to figure out how to survive? And that is why I use Ground News. Ground News is an app/website that aggregates news sources in one place and tells you their political biases and who owns them. I personally have been using them for quite a while, because not only does it aggregate news sources without some algorithm trickery, it also tells me everything I need to know about a source before I read it. That way, when I go into a topic, I can know ahead of time that an article about, let's say, Saudi oil is owned by a Saudi Arabian company, so they might be biased in how they present it. Just go to the link check.ground.news/Slormp to get 15% off any of the subscriptions. And if you order using the link, I will get a 40% commission. It's a more direct way to support me than relying on YouTube ads to give me money. I have the link in the description. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Thanos thought he was creating a utopia by removing half of all life. You remove half of all life, now there's twice as much resources for the half that's left. The problem is, no one can use those extra resources if the sun is blotted out and everyone is starving. So yeah, Thanos probably didn't just snap away half of all life. I think he doomed the rest of it too. Besides the little guys around hydrothermal vents, they're probably just vibing.